We going? Cool. Hello, everybody. Here in the studio, Jack Straw. Hello, internet people. Thank you for joining us out there. My name is Levi Fuller. I manage the artist residency programs at Jack Straw Cultural Center, among other duties. And one of those residency programs is the Jack Straw Writers Program. This is the 26th year of that program. Our curator is Michael Schmeltzer. Got a wonderful group of writers. This is the first of 3 readings. You can join us in the studio the next 2 Fridays or out there on Facebook or YouTube. Yeah, just really excited to be back here in the studio. We had two years in the wilderness of readings from home, and it's really just doing my heart good to be here among you all. So thank you. These residency programs do receive support from the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, King County Lodging Tax, the Washington State Arts Commission, the National Endowment for the Arts, Arts Fund, Rainier Foundation, Humanities Washington, and the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, and individual contributors, which we very much appreciate all of your contributions of any size. Yeah, I don't know. I'm out of interesting things to say, and there's many more interesting people to hear tonight, so I will hand things off to Michael Schmeltzer, who was actually in the last group of Jack Straw writers to have their readings here in the studio in 2019, and now is back as our curator this year. So welcome, Michael. When you're up here, you're good.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hi to everyone on the internet. I'd like to begin by thanking the Jack Straw Cultural Center and its staff for putting together such a wonderful program for the writers in Washington State and beyond. In particular, I'd like to thank Joan and Levi and the engineers whom I had the pleasure of working with, Aisha, Daniel, and Joel. So thank you all very much. It's been an absolute honor and a very humbling experience to get to curate these 12 writers. We're going to begin this reading series with 4 tremendous talents from this year's Jack Straw writing program. Opening the night and kicking off the series will be Katharine Strange. In her Jack Straw project description, Katharine Strange wrote, quote, "When I was 22, I quit my dream job, threw out my antidepressants, got married, and followed my new husband to the UK in hopes of outrunning my mental illness," unquote. This was my introduction to Katharine Strange, memoirist, and ever since then I've been waiting to hear the rest of that story. That opening line to her project description contained all the things I've come to expect with Katharine's writing: a great sense of timing, pacing, an instinct for surprise, and the type of humor I almost feel bad for laughing at. But we shouldn't feel bad, because that humor is an invitation we've received from a writer who understands life can be absurd and traumatic simultaneously. By letting others take part in this shared laughter, Katharine gives us a compelling personal story and a witty, if not slightly snarky lens through which we can look back on our own lives with a bit more empathy aimed at ourselves, at the complicated people in our life, and each other. So please welcome Katharine Strange.
Thanks for that introduction. That was great. Hi, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, people live streaming. Hello. Yeah, I think Michael did a great job introducing the project. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to read an excerpt from my first chapter tonight. The morning of my wedding, I was awoken by a nightmare. Nightmares were not an unusual occurrence. My top 3 by frequency, not preference, were drowning, car out of control, and screaming, but no sound coming out. Perhaps then I shouldn't have been surprised, but it was a disconcerting way to start what was purportedly the happiest day of my life. Creeping past slumbering bridesmaids, I locked myself in the hotel bathroom and stared down my reflection. A strange feeling came over me, that the person looking back bore no relation to myself at all. She was a porcelain doll, the kind I'd collected as a child, prying their waists from wood and wire stands. I adjusted their velvety hems and lacy collars, brushed the dust from their long, thick hair, and pretended they were from European cities I'd heard of, Paris or Antwerp. Their stiff arms knew two positions, resting demurely at their sides or grasping for something just out of reach. "You are 22 years old," I whispered to the mirror. "How are you going to promise to do anything for the rest of your life?" My father, a retired major who had specialized in troop deployment during the Gulf War, had composed the plan of attack for the wedding of his only daughter. My friends and I were to be ferried to various salons, given our meals ready to eat, before assuming battle stations in the church. My nails would be painted, my makeup expertly applied, my hair stuck through with pins. I wasn't even responsible for dressing myself. All I had to do was stay perfectly still. I wasn't sure how much this wedding was costing. Every time the topic came up, the answer seemed to be too much. Another debt I owed my parents. The reception was to be held at the Rainier Club, a storied old building in the heart of downtown, where membership can be had for a measly $4,200 a year. In 2007, there were a dozen different reality shows about weddings. That summer, I had worked part-time as a nanny and part-time helping my dad replace the wooden fence around our back pasture. The horses we boarded chewed through the top rail and had escaped on several occasions. In the evening, I would shower off the day's sweat and splinters and sit on the basement carpet to watch the camera pornographically slow pan over head tables, while a voiceover hoarse with lust whispered about beads, hand sewn into the very centers of hydrangeas. If I watched long enough, the horny reverence of platinum weddings and million-dollar wedding would give way to the snark of Bridezilla, a family favorite. We'd sit with our plates of salad and steak, united, for once, by a feeling of superiority. Weddings were meant to be full of little touches that showed the bride's personality and highlighted the particular love story of this particular couple, but more than that, they were to communicate class. Each Baroque detail should insinuate secret wealth, but above all, taste. And so my family pretended that we normally cared about things like napkin folds and top-shelf liquor. My mother, recently let go from her job as a children's minister, had tactically deployed invitations to the most influential people in our congregation. The wedding had grown too big to fail. I showered and, since my friends were still not awake, went down to the lobby for continental breakfast. It was early enough that only the elderly were milling the buffet. With great relief, I spotted my grandpa collecting a hearty plate of sideboard scramble and sausage. It felt like an answered prayer. My grandparents had been married for decades. Surely he would buoy me with his folksy wisdom. Pappy and I weren't close, something I always felt vaguely guilty about. Like the rest of my extended family, he lived in the South. We'd only seen each other 3 times since my family had decamped to western Montana when I was 8. He was a cheery man, and on the rare occasions we talked on the phone, he'd always sign off with, "I love you mighty good, girl." I approached him slowly from behind, placing a hand on his shoulder blade to alert him to my presence, the way one might a horse. Poppy was mostly deaf, refusing my parents' offer to buy him hearing aids. Not only that, but he could not turn his head after a car accident in his teens and a subsequent backwoods surgery had left his neck bones permanently fused. He pivoted from the waist to look at me, a smile dawning across his stoic features. We sat down together with our breakfast trays. "I didn't sleep very well last night. I'm feeling kind of nervous," I confided. "Eh?" he asked loudly. I said I'm nervous. I have cold feet," I shouted at him. Poppy grunted, liberally dousing his buffet eggs with hot sauce. There were so many gaps in my family knowledge. My grandma, Mima, only had 5 stories that she told on rotation. Her favorite was about the time she threw a knife at her brother. But a close second was how God had given her a vision of the man she would marry. In the vision, he was sitting at a big desk. And when she walked into the room, he tilted his hat up with one finger and said, "Hello, beautiful." And it had supposedly happened just like that. At 70, Poppy was still a handsome man, tall, with the lightest sprinkle of salt in his dark hair. He popped a forkful of eggs into his mouth, nodded as if considering something. His eyes sparkled with ancient wisdom as he looked at me over the rim of his glasses. This is it, I thought. He did hear me, and now he's ready to talk. I watched him chew, eager for the thoughts gathering behind that time-worn brow. From the corner of my eye, a puff of tinted blonde hair wheeled closer. Her seated position, combined with the deep lines at the corners of her mouth, brought to mind a ventriloquist dummy. The woman paused at my grandfather's side and said, "My husband's been dead for 8.5 years. Poppy pivoted from the waist. "Eh?" he asked her. "My husband's dead," she replied. "My sister's dead. My parents are dead. My oldest friend, last Tuesday was the 12th anniversary of her death." Was she hitting on my grandpa? At a breakfast buffet? No. If Bridezilla had taught me anything, it's that this was my day. And my day was going to start with my first ever heart-to-heart with my grandfather, wherein he would bestow upon me all of his rich life experiences. Summoning every ounce of assertiveness I could muster, I said, "Excuse me, my grandpa and I." The woman's eyes darted at me, but she didn't falter. Her target was clear as she began in on a long story about a relative's cancerous growth. What was even happening? Poppy wasn't helping. Unable to hear and concerned that the stranger might have something relevant to say, he kept asking her to repeat herself. I thought of snappy comebacks or loudly mentioning Mima, who was still very much alive, or just silently rising and shoving this woman's wheelchair back towards the buffet. Instead, I scowled at my cantaloupe, waiting for her to leave. All too soon, my maid of honor appeared, ushering me toward the door. We had a schedule after all. With the old lady still rambling, I told Poppy I had to go. He took my hand in his. Years of manual labor as a carpenter and a subsistence farmer had left his hands thickly calloused, the knuckles swollen with arthritis. He looked at me then like I was the culmination of a dream. "I love you mighty good, girl," he said. I had wanted to get married. In fact, I had lobbied for it. When Ryan talked about pursuing a master's degree through the European Union, I told him I wouldn't go unless we were married. I'd reasoned that if I was giving up post-graduation job opportunities, back when I believed those were a thing, it was only fair that I have some sort of assurance he wasn't going to dump me in 6 months. From New Year's Eve until Valentine's Day, I'd been on tenterhooks every time he took me out waiting for the ring to appear. When he finally knelt before me on Alki Beach, I lunged for that ring like Gollum. In a matter of weeks, we planned to move to Loughborough, a town in central England we did not even know how to pronounce. We didn't have jobs or a place to live. We would be 5,000 miles away from anyone we knew. Sometimes the plan felt like a collective delusion, the only concrete evidence being Ryan's acceptance letter from Loughborough University. The accompanying information included an orange flyer entitled 10 Reasons Not to Bring Your Wife to Uric Masters. 1, she will be homesick. 2, she will distract you from your studies. At the church, my attendants fastened satin-covered buttons at my back and crowned me with a veil. When my parents left the room to speak with the photographer, my maid of honor turned and said, "You know, there's still time to get out of this. We could leave right now." I let out a breathy laugh, imagining us bursting through the church doors, gathering my train and hopping a bus, a la The Graduate. No, I shook my head. In the back of the church, I waited arm in arm with my father. His face was pulled into a look of stern encouragement, as if he would have loved to give me some sort of cliche-laden halftime pep talk. But the music started. The doors shuttered open, and there, at the end of a long aisle, was Ryan. And I loved him. And that was all that mattered. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Just love the voice in that story. I love the humor, and like I said, that's the thing that got me immediately. Is that you're joking about these things? That's That's something. So next up is going to be Jory Mickelson. Jory has had the misfortune of working with me previously through my other role over at Floating Bridge Press, which meant when I read their application, for fear of being biased in their favor, I definitely judged your work twice as harshly as I did everyone else. This should be a testament to how talented and thoughtful a poet Jory is. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." It is no surprise then that Jory's project is ekphrastic in nature, carrying visual as well as written arts in the mind all at once, and it thrives. These poems are sensual, in service to the visual arts, inspired by them, but in no way beholden to them in order to be their own unique creations. These poems are lush, rich in artistic and literary history, and like a great meal, stick with me long after I've consumed them. Please welcome Jory Mickelson.
Good evening. Hi to everyone online. David Hockney states, "I believe the desire to create pictures lies deep within us. Most of us derive a pleasure from looking, beholding, and seeing, and in being seen, in truly being known. How we picture is how we perceive and interpret the events of the world around us." Hockney affirms that the history of making pictures is less about representation and more about how we see. Our picturing determines the nature of our experiences and therefore the very quality of our lives. In a sense, our pictures are really metaphors, not what we are looking at, but an account of how we have seen. This is not a bird, but how a bird looks inside of me, emotionally, spiritually. From one moment, one picture, one experience to the next, we link them into the story of who we are. It is in sharing our picturing with others that we connect, commune, and ultimately become part of something larger than ourselves. Picturing. 5 Schmidt blue lines, a horse, across a field of white, the painting hanging in its Rheingold of sky. I am ordinary, decor. Haven't visited in a year, this gallery, a space for gazing, for taking in, outside the frame, at the periphery, a face I look at without looking, a stranger, a regard meeting in the white field, 2 lines intersecting. To be alive in the eye is everything. Photograph of Alice Austin, Julia Martin, and Julia Brett dressed up as men, October 15th, 1891. Ladies with an attitude, performing what we might call flamboyant masculinity, but within a private sphere. Permissive impermeability, trousers, cigarettes, alcohol, flair. Alice scowling as if to say, "What of it? I dare." And let's not even mention the second Julia's aggressive umbrella handle springing up between her crossed legs. It's 1800 and waiting. Secret, self-referential, staged. The dream of a world held close, then hidden away. J.C. Leyendecker, illustrator, 1938. Grape leaf, poached egg, ashes from my cigarette. We see in memory how to preserve how you hummed begin at the Beguine, bumping your hips to the beat, wrapped in your bud green cannon towel. How do I paint that swing where you hum and the clarinet sighs in the steam? I've fallen under your western star. Jade dish, red tulip, creased pocket square. You ought to be in pictures, so I put you there. Appearing year after year in trench coat and tweed, dial tone, Brill cream, Bill from Knox Hatters on 40th. Won't you be my little angel? I can be your girl. We'll go to the Golden West. Forgive me. For what I will not mention, forgive me. Because instead of kindness, I made you famous. Self-portrait as a boy, pretending to be a boy. The line, "You have been dead a long season," comes from Louise Bogan's poem, To a Dead Love. Sometimes I wear a ball cap and become the boy my father always wanted, sure of all that's coming in fast and swinging back with easy athleticism. Sometimes I am just a boy that he never wanted, asking for dance lessons, the bike with the handlebar streamers, to watch the cooking show on TV. Those early lessons taught me everything about shame. Self-portrait of a boy pretending to be a boy, still life with child and gendered accessories, red plastic fire truck, action figure, a face looking at my father's face to see if this time I'd guessed right, passed the test for what it means to be A, part of the family, B, a boy, C, on the inside of love. But all this life, I tried my best to survive. Once I was a boy, and now I am myself. He who looks at me, my father, the boy I never became, the man married to my ex who takes me aside and said, "What did he ever see in you?" I admit it. For years, I just paid rent, slept, stayed inside this home, afraid to even paint the walls, with no idea how to make it mine. Slowly, the borders opened. Slowly, the toy soldiers put down their arms. In a hidden pocket, I carry a brass bullet casing, a sapphire ring, a song that begins, "You have been dead a long season. Forget safety. Everything we love is dangerous." Tell me the story again about the tortoise and the hare. I mean, the turtle and the rabbit, how they raced. I mean, how they decided to, or the part where they were moving as fast as their bodies could carry them. Not only my memory of the story, but yours too. Or not either of those, but of the rabbit's surety. Or was it the turtle's persistence? Tell me about the weather. The dull dust summer sun, or the thunderheads blooming in the blue distance. Tell me about the cool green of aspen. I mean willows. I mean the place where the rabbit lay down to rest. Tell me about perseverance and resting as acts of resistance. Tell me how doing nothing solves it. Tell me about how poets always confuse astonishment with awe. Tell me about the delicate arch of the white hind foot, the sensuous curve of shell. Tell me we are close, that we are coming to the end. Please tell me how to begin. Grendel's mother. Grendel's other. Grendel's other. You've been sold a crock about these feeding machines. When my son was weaned, I cut, lopped, sheared them off, took a brand and cauterized the wound. I knew I was the boy's father, the throne's king. We all do what is necessary. I used the oldest spell all witches know, changed my shape, my sex, though it took me to the outmost edges of my craft. We know history is the worst kind of rapist who violates all we've laid to rest. How some pious prick unmanned me, scratched letters in a book, restored what I had gladly given away to keep my kingdom. called me Grendel's mother. The M, two ugly peaks I'd carve off again. This time, I take my blade, decide I will unman the world instead, one warrior at a time. In the dark, let them fear me. Sweet is the blood, wherever it comes from. In Haracha al-Film, the title in Arabic carries several meanings, one of which is when the camera's film is exposed to sunlight and ruined. Every Egyptian hieroglyph gives you side-eye. Every Persian relief, side-eye, maybe smiling. But an Akkadian never deigns to look at you at all, a glance beneath their dignity, their eyes on some king in symmetrically crinkled robes with perfectly tasseled hair, stiff as the smocks of the dozens of ceramic votive statuettes, the Sumerians' eyes enlarged because their eyes were watching a god. Until we carted the devotees off to some white-walled museum where they look upon the lookers, praying their dusty prayers to climate-controlled absence. Our prayers, too, will go unseen or be lost beyond our time. Like the photographic crypt in Lebanon, Studio Scheherazade, where amid the hundreds of thousands of negatives sometimes, an image will emerge of friends, of lovers, of something in between, same-gendered couples playing marriage behind the photographer's screen. Unable to be taken into the afternoon's harsh light, the small-town streets, where if exposed, all is ruined. Always there is a bar. Always there is a bar with some drinker's photo on its wall. Even in Pompeii, the brothel's frescoes depict their most faithful spenders. Is an image about persistence or the ends of memory? They say we cease to live when the last person who knew us dies. If true, what are we to make of fame or curiosity? For now, for those of us no artist has seen fit to render, let's offer toast to the faces in the frames, green lit by the pool table's glass shade or uncovered with the jade ring in the ashes. There used to be smoke here too, volcanic gatherings of heads bent close and fuming through the night, trading what they have for what remains out of reach. The bar lights coming on at close, stunning everyone. In time, not even our lives will be our own, the flank of our speech riding eventually to silence. So let's praise the ghosts of broken drinkers, Jack, Cratronius, Quintus, Benny, Red, though no one knows what their parents called them or who their children wed. Lift a glass to Sivert and Stephanus, not because they were great, but because we still know their names. And you are here doing what they'd be doing, reveling in the bullshit and hammered gold of shitty beer, tilting your head down the bar to see who's just come in. I'm going to close with one poem from my first book, Wilderness Kingdom, published by Floating Bridge Press. Synonym for wing. Taking shelter beneath the bridge, the boy's own shadow at 11, when he first saw two older men than his father locked together on the stony bank, behind the lattice of July's red willow. The men, either certain of their caution or lost, finally to heat given one to another. And the boy knew then what he had never given thought, and his chest eddied both with curiosity and shame. Though at 11 he could not say from where shame had come, perhaps from his violation of what the men had not meant to share. But to make a sound, break a branch, or to toss a rock would end what he couldn't admit then, that he'd wanted to watch. The trembling of his legs, the holding of his breath, the men's noise among the willows, their own wingful sound. And what then? After the men had come to rest, the lighter-haired one putting his head on the older man's chest as they reclined to watch the low water spill green and slow past the exposed gravel bed, and the boy retreating into the woods, then faster, then full out until his lungs a bird's great flapping wings.
I just want to say again, like, I feel like it's some kind of scam that Jack Straw allows me to do this. Like, it should be a service that I pay for. It is amazing to have worked with Jory and Katharine, and you'll get to know the other two writers, and it is such a pleasure. So thanks again, Jack Straw. So I'm going to introduce Danielle here. So I have a little bit of an intro. The power of a secret is proportional to how many people are aware of it. The less people know, the more value that secret has. And taboos almost work similarly in my mind. There are things we do not say, and sometimes when we do, we suffer the consequences. Taboos can hold power over us. When I first read the work of Danielle Hayden, I felt a threshold had been crossed, but where there could be consequence, there was empowerment. Something electric and dynamic and stark, but not empty, never empty. Danielle's writing is confessional, intense, and self-interrogating. It is pared down with no emotional elaborations because what is there, the details, the observations, and bold honesty, is emotional and powerful enough. By examining the various identities she holds, or ones that have defined her in the past, Danielle creates work that manages to break barriers in ways that shock me out of my complacency, both as a reader and as a writer. And I've been spoiled by all the good writing tonight and will continue to be the next couple Fridays. So please welcome Danielle Hayden.
Thank you, Michael, for that glowing introduction, and thanks everybody for coming out and everybody who's tuning in live, and we'll watch it later. Okay. My father's mistress had a husky voice. I don't recall what her exact words were when I picked up the phone, but whatever she said made me keep listening. I was just about to call a classmate, but instead of a dial tone, I heard a tone so unlike my mother's, speaking to Dad about things that no fifth grader should be privy to. I was not ignorant of adults' participation in the carnal, but I did not expect to hear this. I want to pour wine all over you, said the man I had revered only 5 minutes ago. It was horrific, the swift, stabbing realization of his infidelity and the questioning of all I once knew. Worse still was the shame of my arousal creeping in as I found myself ensnared by their clandestine exchange. I paused for a moment to consider what a hellish cleanup it would be to remove Merlot off of a bedspread. And then I thought of her body, sticky and stained. I stretched the cord of the phone to sit down, careful not to make any noise. I was on the futon where our family of 4 had always sat, together, unbroken, in the once secure cove of the den, and I kept listening, cradling the phone to my ear while my father spoke downstairs, imagining what she looked like, how they might have met, wondering how my nearly perfect parent could be doing this, part of me still clinging to some microscopic possibility that this oral revelation was no revelation at all, but some sort of misunderstanding. Ours was a household of pairs, 2 boys, 2 girls, 2 dogs, 2 cats. This woman did not fit. I stayed with them until the end. Once they concluded the first in a series of conversations to which I would be a silent third party, I waited a little while before I drifted downstairs with leaden legs. There was my father, sitting in his black chair, reading the newspaper, as he always did. In between the crisp sounds of turning pages, he made a rhythmic beat with his ringed hand. It was one of his many habits, born from a life of music, done absent-mindedly. His world had not just shattered. The clang of his gold band against the table leg echoed like a death knell. "Hey, Dad," I greeted him. The voice was quiet, even for me. I gingerly took my usual place at the table. A courage to confront lay suspended in air. I could not look at him right away. When I did so, it was to peer at him as if for the first time. "Hey, kiddo," he replied with that same smile on his face and gleam in his eye as he looked at me, his only daughter. For a while, at least, I would remain his favorite girl. As I had always been, 2 peas in a pod, daddy's girl. Pick any hackneyed phrase you like that is subject to Freudian analysis. He and I had been that. I had developed early on a preference for the company of my father over my mother. After all, it was in his shadow, not hers, that I always felt safe, fun, free. But it was more than the mere closeness of kin. He and I bonded intellectually. It was he who taught me to read and gave me a lifelong adoration of the practice. I explored mythology early on and sometimes likened myself to Athena in reference to her being born directly from Zeus's head. A cerebral connection between father and daughter only strengthened our familial bond, and it was with mutual respect that we valued each other's keen mind and sharp wit. References, no matter how esoteric or obscure, were always understood between the two of us. Everything was like our own little inside joke, especially since no one ever expected the scruffy fellow in multicolored pants to be the smartest guy in the room. But the inside joke had mutated and had become just a secret. Over the years, my parents had been functional, usually polite, occasionally even romantic. But moments of mirth had gradually slowed their pace, then ceased altogether. My parents just stopped laughing one day. My mother stopped first. She ground her teeth at night. Her hair was falling out. I saw the tag of her green dress. She had dropped down to a size 2. I was young, but I noticed this erosion of self, the shrinking and disappearing. I wondered even then if that was what it was to be a wife, to shrink all your parts into something smaller. What then did it mean in my family to be a husband? She was expressive with me, but with others she had learned to bite her tongue. I wondered sometimes how she bore with grace the acrid taste of blood. I, too, learned to go within. For most of my life, I had not used my voice either. This was my inheritance. After I discover my father's affair, I reveal nothing to him for months, and thus I remain. It is uncomfortable concealing the truth, but I have to choose my dad over myself. I know no other way. Many days I did not think about it, but it is always in the back of my mind. I do not know what to say, how to say it, or if I should say anything at all. I know it is wrong, but I am afraid. I know it is wrong, but he is my favorite person. One morning over breakfast, I tell him I am upset. He asks why. I offer a name, her name. I'm staring into my oatmeal. You're upset because I have a friend that's not your mother? I face him, my eyes narrowed like knife slits. I'm upset that you have a girlfriend who's not my mother. From his mouth begins to flow the careful consonants of denial. Don't lie, I command. It is wholly unfamiliar, this timbre of my voice. He admits it, but insists my mother wouldn't really want to know. I almost roll my eyes, but I know that I must protect him. I have lived 10 winters. That is old enough for fealty. And not too long after, he tells me he has ended the affair. For more than a year, I continue keeping it secret. I had already planned to stay quiet and take this secret to my grave, even if he had continued his philandering. And I would have, all if it weren't for middle school. I hear the distant doors of a school bus hiss to a close as I walk into Bates Academy to begin the 6th grade in 1999. I'm immediately out of place. Cliques are already established, as most of the kids there knew each other for previous years. We wear a uniform, but as you and I are well aware, adolescents are particularly adept at creating new social hierarchies within purported homogeneity. I have the brains for the school, but not the braces with bright bands. No breasts either. I'm from the wrong side of town, and I don't even know what a Coach handbag is, let alone why all the it girls seem to be carrying one. The politics of junior high are largely fixed, and they are cruel. My science teacher is the biggest bully of all, and unkind only to me and one other girl named Maya. Like me, Maya is reserved. Like me, Maya retreats. I bring home straight A's anyway, but despite my unblemished grade point average, the first few months are rough, and I cry every morning on the way to school. I eat lunch alone, though my appetite is practically non-existent anyway. I beg to change schools and go where most of my friends attended after 5th grade. For once, my mother sympathizes with me, but she says that she and my father will decide. Ultimately, it is he who refuses me, telling me that Bates will offer great opportunities and I need to stick it out for at least the remainder of the school year. I've had his back, and he cannot reach out his hand to save me while I'm drowning. I had never before, and have never since, danced with vengeance, but that day I turn on him, 11 years old and furious. "You owe me," I yell from the back seat. "What is she talking about, Joe?" asked my mother. There is an edge to her voice, alarm intermingled with confusion. I freeze. I have said too much on impulse from this scream that wrenched itself from my throat, viscerally, violently. The die is cast, as Caesar once said. Now my dad is exposed, as am I, but I insist to my mom that it's nothing. I remain quiet for the rest of the car ride. But I do not let it go. I begin dropping hints to my mother about my father's past indiscretion. I lack the moxie to tell her outright, but if I continue to suffer at school, then I feel that my father must somehow pay. I do muse that if I disclose to her at all, it should be because she deserves to know and because I love her. Instead, it is vengeance, not moral duty based off of a social contract, not filial piety, but vengeance that moves me to such frankness. The truth comes out because I am pissed at him, not loyal to her. I know this. My nuclear family knows this and how fucked up this is. Still, my mother seems pleased by this lone aspect, that I'm finally on her side, that she has found an ally in me for once. It is to be short-lived. My parents try counseling, to no avail. They separate when I'm 12. The divorce is finalized in November of my 13th year. I am strangely not destroyed by this. I still see my father nearly every day, and he quickly reclaims his position as my favorite. How easy it is to reconcile with him, how naturally it comes to me. It is almost effortless, even as I learned that over my parents' 20-year marriage, there were multiple other women, that my father was a libertine. My birth had changed him, he had always told me, but apparently I hadn't changed him in all the ways that mattered. At least now I fit in a little more at school. Almost no one's parents are still married, and I have something to talk about. My mother leaves me alone more too, which is a welcome adjustment. Still, I do blame myself. Not in that way that children in peer-reviewed psychology articles are expected to, but in the way that stems from my having been the catalyst for things to fall apart. I visit Dad at his new apartment after he moves out. It is an old high-rise on Woodward Avenue with modest furnishings. I wonder if he is lonely, especially on holidays, even after he starts dating again. My mother's family won't speak to him, and I feel guilty that he is in this situation. When I am 16, I come home from school to learn he's had a stroke and is in the hospital. He hadn't been taking his blood pressure medication. Too expensive. He's a bass player, and my mother had been the breadwinner. The dexterity in his right hand has suffered, and for years he can no longer play music. His band breaks up. I'm crushed by the weight of my guilt. If only I hadn't said anything, my dad would probably be okay. And he is still so kind to me. He does not seem to blame me at all. I'm sure he's felt angry, but not once was he spiteful or even mean. I question how he can show such unconditional love to the kid who had ratted him out. How can he be so welcoming when we hang out in his apartment, the apartment I felt I had put him in? I had ruined his life by being a snitch. My parents' separation, that itself was bearable, but the fact that I had precipitated the separation, this is something I still carry now. I am better, and my dad has implored me to release this burden, but it follows me everywhere, along with my awareness of his mortality, which I've long felt that I hastened with my decision. So I'm still angry with myself, but I knew I didn't want to and couldn't stay angry with my dad. He is flawed, but he is my father. He is forgiven. As painful as that period was, his fall from grace helped me see him as human, complex, and multifaceted, and fallible, as we all are. I had known that he was imperfect, certainly. I had observed and even documented in my diary his peccadillos, his uncouth sayings in social situations, his irascible impatience while driving, his questionable sartorial choices. All of those things were unfavorable attributes that I could have done without. But I definitely had him on a pedestal, and that phone call altered my life forever. But we were able to heal, and I will always love him. We remained close. My first tattoo was for him. He walked me down the aisle. We talk, we visit, we laugh, and I'm proud to be my father's daughter. Thank you.
Everyone take a deep breath. Like, oh my gosh, that is such a complex piece on such a complex family dynamic, and it just makes me think so much about the various ways we present as parents and how we look back on our own parents, and it's just a lot to reckon with, and I am so impressed that you're able to do that. Our last reader tonight is Allie Aung. Sometimes a poet will come along just when you need them, and Allie Aung was one of those poets for me. In their application, Allie described their poems as an offering. And sometimes you don't realize how much an offering means and how hungry you've been until you are given a feast. Every poem from Allie is a meal made by a friend who only wants the best for you. The poems will tell you stories about family and lovers and pain, stories of friends, and all the while they will offer you a second serving of the main course, even as you're just finishing dessert. There's an infectious joy in Allie's work, as well as Allie the person, a passionate understanding of the world around them, the relationships that help keep us going, especially during these times. Their work is the best argument against cynicism, and even when the poems speak of exhaustion, of trauma, it has offered so much of itself already. The reader has been given so much nourishment. You know you'll both make it no matter what happens. Everyone, please welcome Allie Aung.
Thank you. If I weren't on SSRIs, I'd probably be crying right now. That was a really sweet introduction. I'm going to start by reading a poem that I have come to like starting my readings with, because it feels like a good way to kind of enter this act of reading poetry aloud, which is very scary to me. It's called Invocation. Let the moon wobble. Let the basil plant flower. Let the poets discombobulate. Let the verbs noun. Let the nouns verb. Let the grief howl. Let the emails unread. Let the land speak. Let the oceans revenge. Let the people free. Let the people free. Okay. This poem, the title says it all, I guess. It's called After Prolonged Grief Disorder Was Added to the DSM-5, and it starts with an epigraph from Vivian B. Pender, who is the president of the American Psychiatric Association, and she says, "Grief in these circumstances is normal, but not at certain levels, and not most of the day, nearly every day, for months. Today, my heart is working remotely. I watch it thump and thrum reliably behind the blur of a computer screen. A man with a gun opens fire in a subway car. I refresh my emails and reheat the stale remnants of my morning coffee. A dull twinge of dread crystallizes in my throat. When I type Asian woman into Google, the algorithm helpfully suggests killed, attacked, stabbed, shoved onto the train tracks, hit by a baseball bat. I hit refresh again. A war breaks out far enough away to be a safe abstraction. Thank God we can finally get back to normal in acquaintance size, as though the millions dead can be swatted out of sight like a mosquito on a humid summer night, smushed against a paper towel, one stubborn limb still twitching until it stops. The employee handbook reads, "Don't forget to clock out before you let the fragile ceiling of your grief shatter around you. Don't forget to sweep up the shards on your way out." The truth is, I am bored of my grief. I've written this before, this poem, this elegy, trying to find some assemblage of words, some spell to make sense of this, the cruel machinery of capital grinding relentlessly toward a singular, griefless end. That one was sad. This next one is slightly less sad. I wrote it in February when I was really feeling the Seattle winter blues. And those blues are kind of persisting because it is still very cold and rainy in Seattle, which is unfortunate. But this poem is called February in Seattle. How many synonyms are there for gray or endless or as mushy as an overcooked casserole? I take the mountains for granted, let my calls go to voicemail, my heart hollowing like canned sitcom laughter. Outside my window, a woman and her dachshund parade down the street wearing matching Burberry sweaters while the rents skyrocket into the stratosphere. I practice patience, water my similes, wait for them to overtake the front lawn. Hummingbirds hover like tiny surveillance drones. Every day is a minute longer than the one before. I cradle each minute of light in my hand like a pearl. Okay, this poem, am still revising it, so this is like a sneak preview. Ooh. It was written, I was in a class with the poet Jane Wong, and she gave us a prompt to write a poem about everything. So this is my attempt to write a poem about everything, and it's called Everything. My mother, my father, and I were all born in the year of the pig. The three little pigs, my mother called us. I thought anything would be better than a pig, an ugly, snout-nosed creature, all dirt and gluttony. Does every animal long to be a different kind of beast? Does a snake lie tossing and turning in its snake bed, dreaming itself a fearsome dragon, awakening with flame still white-hot on its tongue? In graduate school, I write a poem about eating my favorite rice dish, and a professor, white, tells me, if you're going to write that kind of poem, you have to make it stand out. The word that is jabbed in my direction like a finger into my chest. My poem shrivels into a dried up husk. In a dream, I roll around in the mud, snorting and squealing in delight. I relish in my filth. My poems, like me, have been known to talk with their mouths full. They list their obsessions like a spell. Spit, holes, flesh, fruit, teeth, blood, shame. More than anything, I want to make my people proud. When I say my people, I mean those who have held my hand through heartbreak and bad acid trips, those whose names have been forgotten or erased, those whose blood I do or do not share. Despite my skin, despite my posture, despite the dust bunnies holding assembly beneath my bed, despite... My father, brown, is an immigrant, I say to my grandmother, white, at the dinner table after she has tired out another tirade about immigrants ruining the country. I'm 14 years old, mouth newly unmetalled. My cousin's jaws drop mid-chew. Silence deadens the air around me. Wild boars are only known to attack humans in rare circumstances, when they feel cornered or threatened. They will lunge towards their assailant, tearing their teeth through tissue and tendon. That's different, my grandmother says, flustered. I mean the ones who sneak in over the border. I am only as dangerous as the world demands me to be. Inside my closed mouth, my canines sharpen. Despite this, I loved her. Despite this, I wept when she died. Despite the pit of resentment still pressing down on my chest, despite my blood that is also hers. Sometimes, I wonder what would happen if I allowed my poems to grow as big and wild as my longing, if I let them consume me the way a tsunami swallows a village, the way a blue whale swallows mouthfuls of ocean and spits out everything that's not nourishment. I write because I want to create a kinder universe, one where I lock eyes with a cop and he crumbles into dust, one where the prison doors fly open and the land sighs in relief, one where all of our friends are free. In a photograph, I hold my father's hand outside the courtroom at his citizenship ceremony. He is dressed in his one good suit, crisp and stainless. We each wave a tiny American flag and wear a dazzling American grin. Okay, I have one poem, and this one's, I'll end on a happy one to live up to my introduction. It's been rough out there, you know? Okay, this poem is called All Girls Go to Heaven. Even the ones whose retainers collect dust under the bed, the ones who kiss with their eyes open, the ones who dog-ear their library books, who forget their mother's birthday, but still remember their third-grade crush's home phone number. Yes, all girls go to heaven, even the ones who aren't girls at all, but something far murkier, the lovesick, the fatherless, the ungovernable and uncouth. I've heard that heaven looks just like this. Everyone you love in side-by-side sleeping bags, stoned off acetone and hushed secrets, holding your best friend's hand until you fall asleep, the summer stretching endlessly ahead of you, as invincible and full as the moon. Thank you.
We didn't really talk about this.
Yeah, we didn't. Thank you all. Thank you to our wonderful writers. Thank you, Michael. It's really just been my honor and privilege to be here with you all, and Jack Straw's honor to work with you all. If you would like to come back, if you haven't already registered to come for next Friday or the following Friday, drop us a line or join us online. Otherwise, we'll see you out there. We'll be getting these writers out after this in various public venues, probably some virtual, but hopefully more in person over the rest of the year. So thank you all for being here. Thanks.